Thank you so much for joining us here on the Elite Sports Podcast today, Coach. It is just so great to see you here virtually. I wish we were talking about things like training camp and college football practice getting ready to start, but we're in certainly a state of uncertainty here, are we not?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, it's just it's like every day it goes up exponentially. I mean, that's a 50-cent word, but it's the truth.
It sure is, but I tell you what, it's such a pleasure to have you because so many your words and the way that you're coaching and the things that you've done in your career have heavily influenced so many people like myself to get into broadcasting. You were such a welcome voice for ESPN for so long. But I want to kind of go back to your coaching career because we lost Pat Dye just a couple of months ago, the great Pat Dye. You had a couple battles with Auburn at your time at Alabama. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. You might have lost some of those, but Coach was amazing. Talk about Pat, what he was like, what it was like coaching against him, and kind of how he was as a person.
Well, we lost all of them.
Yeah.
We didn't. If you go to Alabama, you have to beat Auburn, and vice versa. And in the 3 years we were there, we didn't accomplish that. We played close, but that doesn't mean anything. And that was one of the great disappointments of my attempt to do the job for those folks. And one of the main reasons, of course, was that Coach Dye's teams were huge and fast and were well disciplined. The thing that made him and his approach to football especially difficult is that he could change offenses as he did while we were there. He changed from a triple option to throwing the football. I mean, the emphasis on throwing the football, and they were equally effective. And that's really hard to do. We see people try to do that today, and it's tough. It takes a year or two to change personnel and all that sort of thing. Well, it didn't take them long at all. So they were really formidable, physically tough outfits, and they just managed to beat us each time.
Well, when I think back to your time at Alabama, you won the SEC Coach of the Year award in 1989. But I always go back to a quote from Nick Saban, which is, "Success is not a continuum, it's momentary. The rigors of competing in the SEC makes losing devastating, while winning is merely a relief." Would you agree with Coach Saban with that sentiment?
I hadn't seen that, but it feels that way. It really does. I thought I had pretty much been to the mountaintop when it came to competition when I played on great teams in the NFL for 10 years. I played on pretty good teams at Georgia Tech under another great coach, Bobby Dodd. I played on great teams with Vince Lombardi and Don Shula at Green Bay and Baltimore. And I thought I understood those feelings that Nick talked about. But you don't understand that unless you play or coach football in the state of Alabama, because it is it's a kind of an obsession there that really doesn't exist anywhere else. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's really good if you're a member of the football team, you've got that kind of backing, and it's not so good if you're losing to Auburn. So I understand what Nick says, and I think it's probably true.
Well, of course, you also go on to coach at Kentucky, and you guys make a bowl game for the first time in a decade while at Kentucky. Just kind of talk about the challenges of winning in Lexington. And kind of Mark Stoops, what he's done for the Kentucky Wildcats. Do you feel like he's kind of, not to limit what a program can do or be, that he's sort of kind of hit the ceiling of what can happen and what you can be at Kentucky?
Well, I don't think he's hit the ceiling. I think he's going to continue to do well, and I think they'll just get better. I've always thought you could win in football at Kentucky. Obviously, I thought that I wouldn't have gone there. I think it's important, and it's a funny thing to say, but it's important to have the support of the basketball coach. And I don't know, I haven't ever talked to Mark about whether Calipari is actively backed him or not, but Rick Pitino was fantastic to us. And I mean, there were great players that we got to visit our football program only because they were going to get a chance to go to Rupp Arena and see our basketball team play. And Rick would bring them in the locker room. Everything that was legal to do, that's what we did. So I felt like we were given every opportunity there, and it's a good place. And I think, Mark, if you look at last year's team, had he been able to keep any quarterback healthy, they might have won a couple more. But when they lost all their quarterbacks, they put a wide receiver back there and kept right on finding ways to win. That kind of thing is the mark of really having a program that is clicking on all cylinders. And I told Mark this. I think he's got a special gift, and I think Kentucky's lucky to have him, and vice versa.
Trust me, I got to see that firsthand covering Mizzou going down there, thinking Missouri should win this game, and then watching Lynn Bowen and as a receiver playing quarterback run all over Missouri, and it was a true testament to kind of what he's done. Coach, I mean, you coach in the SEC for 10 years. You've been a part of some great SEC features like Saturdays in the South. What is it? Coaching in the SEC, the slogan is "It just means more." We kind of talked about some of the comments Nick Saban's had about it. Just what did it mean to you being from Georgia, from the South, being able to coach 10 years in the SEC, and how difficult is it just in day-to-day preparation and recruiting down there, trying to stay a cut above?
Well, when we went to Alabama, it was not a real popular choice, as everybody knows. And we had a wonderful guy that was our minister over here in Atlanta. He called our house, and Carolyn answered. My wife, Carolyn, answered the phone, and he said, "Well, my goodness, Carolyn, are you and Bill okay? I've read some really rough things. Are you sure you're okay?" And she said, "Oh, it's Bill Floyd was his name." She said, "Oh, it's fine. We're fine, Bill. You got to understand that over here, football is like a religion." He said, "Oh no, honey, it's a lot more important than that." And he was right. It's 365 days a year. If you stop at the filling station to fill up, you're going to talk about one thing. If you go from Tuscaloosa to Dothan, Alabama, to go to a ladies' cotillion club, you're going to talk about one thing. If you go to a Red Elephant Club, obviously you're going to talk about one thing. It's just, I was walking across the parking lot one day, and it was probably about this time of year, July. And in Tuscaloosa, July means 100 degrees. And I saw this beautiful older lady. And by older, I'm talking 80, 85 maybe. But she was dressed to the nines and had her faculties completely about her. She saw me. She shouted out my name and made a beeline, walked straight over to me. And I said, "Yes, ma'am, what can I do for you?" And she took my arms in her hands and looked me in the eye with tears in her eyes. We had won 9 games the year before. She said, "Do you think we can win this year?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. I promise you we'll do better." It's just a constant. It's a constant theme in life, the football program, and how it became that way. I'm not sure. I know Coach Bryant had a lot to do with it, but I think it might have been like that before Coach Bryant. You know, when Coach Bryant played there, maybe I don't know, but that's how it is, and you don't ever have to wonder if the right things are being emphasized until you try to get the guys to go to class. Sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge.
Well, Coach, you played for 3 of the great coaches at any level, and Bobby Dodd, of course, and Vince Lombardi, and Don Shula with the Baltimore Colts. Whenever you got into coaching, and how much did you take kind of from these coaches and sort of formulating your own style? I mean, I think young people like me grow up and you see highlights of old Green Bay Packers teams, and you see, I'm from Kansas City. You talk about my dad watching the first Super Bowl, the World Championship game, and you think about, oh, these players must have had a complete bond with Coach Lombardi, which you didn't really have at the time. But looking back to the 3 coaches you played for, how much did they influence you kind of in the end?
They all influenced us enormously, but I think it was more of influence for our ethical and our moral approach to life. And I did have my differences with Coach Lombardi, but we resolved them on his deathbed,
Mm-hmm.
which I really had no choice but to go and apologize to him about some things I had said because I was out of line, which was not uncommon for me, shooting my mouth off. But what we learned from those great men was what a team is. And we learned from those great men how a team is assembled and continued. And what comes from great teams having been together is more than a championship ring or a Super Bowl ring. It's a whole lot more. It's a lifetime of relationships because people who don't look like each other, who don't go to the same church together, who don't have the same color skin, who don't go to the same grocery stores, don't listen to the same music, those people become brothers in football because you don't have any choice. You either join and become one of the team or you don't make it. And once you've done that, once you've bonded with a group of people like that, it never goes away. And it's almost like a miracle, especially in today's world, where people are somehow finding reasons to hate each other. I mean, absurd, nonsensical reasons, right from the top of our government. It's really hard to believe what we're going through. And it sounds stupid to say football has part of the answer, but it does. It does. And it's not stupid. So all that stuff is what the great teachers really do is to teach you a whole lot more than football. You do win championships if you're playing for great coaches, but you'll win a lot more.
Coach, I know you've told this story a lot, but for kind of speaking on what you've brought up here and kind of what the country's going through, if you wouldn't mind, kind of for our listeners that maybe haven't heard it, just talking about your idea of the huddle and what it means to you and how you, when you joined the Packers, had never been in a huddle with a man of color, with African Americans, and kind of what you took away from that and how it kind of shaped you going forward.
Well, I was the last draft choice. They had 20 rounds in those days, and I was 20th. And I was joining a team that was already being called the greatest team of all time. And that was before they won 3 world titles in a row. Lombardi had a lot of good attributes, and I didn't see him at the time. I didn't like the fact that he shouted at us a lot. I didn't like the fact that he was a Yankee, he was Catholic, and he was Italian, and all those Southern prejudices that we had at that time. Some of them we still have. But nonetheless, I thought the biggest problem I'd have is the fact that I'd never been in a huddle with an African-American person. And Lombardi's greatest attribute, in my opinion, and not only helped him win more championships, 5 world titles in 7 years, that'll never be done again, ever, by anybody. Not only helped him win more championships, but it helped him to make a powerful statement to the American public about prejudice. We had more African-American players than anybody in the league. There were teams in the league that had none and bragged about it, or had a quota, and they might have 1 or 2 African-American players, which is unthinkable today. But in those days, that's what was going on. Well, nobody could beat us. And it wasn't just because we had a lot of African-American guys. It was who we had, both black and white. And because what that meant was, once you got in that training camp, you were going to get a chance to play. It didn't matter what you looked like or where you came from. And so once you earned a spot, you were respected. But I thought that the African-American guys would look at me, last draft choice, hear my Southern accent, hurt me, and send me home. And I didn't blame them. Well, that's not what they did. Led by Willie Davis, our great defensive captain, those guys embraced me, talked to me, spent time with me, sat me down when I said stupid, racist things, and I did. I didn't mean to, but I did. They would not slap me in the mouth or walk away from me or blindside me on the football field. They would explain to me, listen, Bill, you don't know how that sounds. Don't do that. Don't say that. Say this, this, and this. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And it created for me a bond that wouldn't have happened any other way. Then I go to the Baltimore Colts, and there's John Mackey, the greatest tight end of all time from Syracuse University. And he and his wife, Sylvia, sort of adopted Carolyn and me. I don't know why. But once again, our lives were changed. And that's what happens in team sport when you have folks that aren't prejudiced who give you a chance. What they did was give me a chance. And I felt like when I began to coach that I wanted to give as many young people a chance to have the same kind of experience as I could. And I hear from my guys all the time. I know they had a similar experience, and I'm grateful. And it wasn't because of anything I did. It's because we brought the right people onto the teams who cared about each other.
Oh, well, that's so well said. And I mean, you as a center, you snapped the ball to two of the greats, to Bart Starr. You spoke at his funeral, to Johnny Unitas. Here in Kansas City, for the first time in 50 years, there's a Super Bowl champion here. I'll tell you, around these parts, the year started off pretty great, Bill. Believe it or not, the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Things are looking good. There's a parade. And then we get off track a little bit. But what have you seen from Patrick Mahomes, as a quarterback? Some of the things he's able to do, some of the reads he makes, the decision-making, the athleticism. It's really kind of unlike anything we've maybe ever seen, isn't it?
I guarantee you it's unlike anything you've ever seen.
I was trying to downplay it just a little,
Well, you can't. I mean, the kid is lightning in a bottle. I mean, he's magic. I mean, I'm 77 years old. I snapped the ball to Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas. There were a bunch of other great quarterbacks I snapped the ball to in various games on different teams that are in the Hall of Fame. I sit here watching. My wife doesn't. She's watched over 700 football games. We have a deal now. She never has to watch another game in her life if she doesn't want to. Okay. Ooh. She asked me, when's that Mahomes guy going to play again? I want to watch. She wants to watch. Everybody wants to watch when this kid plays. Why? Is it because they're going to probably win? They got a better chance? No, it's because he is magic. I mean, you can go to Broadway and see a great, great star. And I hadn't been enough to think of anybody in particular. I guess the guy that wrote Hamilton, that would qualify. But I mean, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a once-in-a-lifetime talent. And he generates this enthusiasm with the team. He's unselfish. He gets the guys together over on the sideline. He does the things that you just really wouldn't expect from a real young quarterback. And then he does the thing which in America you have to do, which is to win the big one. You have to win it all. You'll never be regarded as real special unless you win it all. And that's not fair, and it's probably not the way it ought to be, but it certainly is in this country.
Well, he just took up ownership in the Kansas City Royals here. He just bought a house about 10 minutes west of me here. I'm going to tell you there's a few more zeros in front of his mortgage than there is mine, Bill, but we're sure glad to have him here, and it's been a true great experience. I got to ask you about this because while you were at Kentucky, South Carolina and Arkansas joined the SEC. In 2012, Missouri and Texas A&M come on board. How do you feel about the SEC's ability to expand, especially 8 years ago, Missouri and A&M? Do they make, are they a good counter? Are they good for the SEC? Has this worked out well kind of for both sides, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world is for old coaches to sit out in wherever we sit around and pontificate about what ought to happen and what ought not to happen. As if we had some special knowledge. I kind of thought, and again, I'm a traditionalist and I'm a old stick in the mud in some ways. In other ways, I'm very progressive. And I'm thinking now more about players' rights and about diversity and that sort of thing. But when it comes to traditional rivalries and geographic things like Missouri versus Kansas, or Missouri versus Oklahoma, or Georgia Tech versus Georgia, and Georgia Tech used to be in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
When I played, we were in the SEC. I just love the old geographic units, and that's what seemed right to me. And when those started breaking down, I felt a lot of discomfort. It seemed strange to see TCU in some league that stretches all the way to the East Coast. I mean, that doesn't seem logical. And then you start to look at the finances of travel and the distances that these kids have to travel. And ostensibly, they're supposed to be back in chemistry class the next morning at 8 o'clock. Well, sure. I mean, we all know where that goes. So I like the old alignments. And I think it's been good for the league, probably economically, and because the TV revenue seems to mean so much. But I really liked the old geographic alignments because I think they generated more sort of genuine, how shall we say, I think the fans had more fun pulling for those local Clemson versus South Carolina, and now they're in different leagues, but you go across the country to play somebody in your league. Seems strange.
Well, let me tell you this, as a Missourian, someone that now covers the Missouri Tigers, as much as we miss the rivalry with Kansas, I'll tell you, I'll take a trip down to Auburn, Alabama, or Tuscaloosa over those trips down to Stillwater or Ames, Iowa, any day. So I think we're definitely doing good on that regard. I enjoy the road trips. Let's put it that way. Even though they're a little longer, they're a lot more fun.
I didn't say it wasn't better for you.
Exactly.
It's great for you, and I mean, it's so fascinating to actually be there in those places you heard about when you were a kid or watched on television. Yeah, that's great. And from that standpoint, from the standpoint of the sheer magic of it, it's great for the players, the student athletes. But I'm just saying the mechanics and the economics of it, it just seems strange to an old person. And I'm probably completely off base with that.
No, not at all. I completely understand. It is a little bit like being in high school and you're not you, but your friend gets to take the pretty girl to prom. It's kind of cool. There's some caveat, some gravitas that goes with it. I tell you what, Coach, before we let you go, I've got to ask you, as former president of the NFLPA, seeing kind of where things are right now, as we're a month away from kind of where the season needing to start, where so much uncertainty. How difficult is it right now what the NFLPA, the NFL, and what college presidents are having to go through right now just to try to get a season underway here? I mean, this just seems very concerning, and I just hope for the best. I'm just one of those people that a year without football would be a year that I wouldn't want to remember.
Well, I feel the same way you do about football. I think and again, it's for people who are my friends and my family, it's well known that I ascribe way too much importance to football, but I think it is important symbolically to our country. I think it's very important, but it is not, here, listen to me now, it is not important enough to lose one life of a young person. So can we put our guys on the field? There's a certain danger just to running out there without a pandemic. And we all knew that when we did it, so fine. So we did it for a long time, and we take our lumps and we don't complain. But to go out there not knowing what's going to happen, would you send your child out there? And yeah, you can play basketball, you can play tennis, you can play golf. Our granddaughter's going to play on her softball team. I think that's fine. But when we start lining up and you and I are going to be smashing our face into each other, and we read all this information about how the molecules emanate from our mouth, and they got the virus attached to them, and I just can't see how we're going to do it. I pray we can and still keep our players safe. But if we can't keep the players safe, we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to suck it up and wait.
That's so poignant, so well said. I tell you, on a personal note, your words and your career, your coaching career has been so uplifting and positive for so many people. And I just want you to know that there's people out there that really took to a lot of things you said and have just watched you paint such a beautiful picture of this silly little game that we love so much called football. And you've done it for a long time, and I hope you'll continue to do it. And I hope everybody will go to your website, billcurry.net, to check out everything that you've got going on, because you really are an inspiration to a lot of people, and we just can't thank you enough, Coach.
Well, thank you for having me on, and you've more than appropriately thanked me. So you're very gracious, and I'm appreciated.
Well, absolutely. Stay safe and stay healthy, and here's hoping for better times in the future,
You too.
Coach.
You too.
Thank you.